friends, this is an, in more than one way, hopeful message. It consists of three parts. There's another statement which I gave in court a few days ago, and of which we have an English translation that's available for those of you who are interested. Together with the already now infamous secret dossier written by the intelligence services and its English translation, it provides both the official evidence and further supporting facts that now prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the criminal proceeding against me is nothing but a, I quote from the dossier, construct to shut me up and put me behind bars without any legal substance whatsoever. So here's the deal, part one. As I already told you a few times, I have always been very, very happy to receive your letters and postcards as they kept me going and my head above water in this very frustrating situation. But what is happening now goes far beyond this lifeboat effect. I am absolutely convinced that the incredible yet palpable enormous push of positive energy that is all of a sudden reaching me is coming to me through your letters and postcards, but also through the vigils outside the prison and the many of you who are supporting me by coming to the courtroom for the hearings, plus your many other actions in my support. Up until a few years ago, though, I, as a rational attorney, would have probably thought that maybe I'm just imagining things. But I don't think that this is possible anymore. Never in my entire life have I been under such enormous pressure. 6 months of preliminary detention in a maximum security prison whose claim to fame, according to other more experienced inmates, is that here they do everything to break you, make you feel utterly powerless and helpless. As an intended consequence of this detention, my capacity to defend myself is reduced to maybe 5%. I have no access to my files, no access to my computer, and I cannot talk to the witnesses whom we want to hear. However, as you already know, some crack under pressure, but we don't. And I say we for a reason. Despite the predicament, I am always fully awake and focused when they take me to the courtroom. And believe it or not, it feels as though I am protected and clad in an impenetrable armor of energy, and as though I carry an indestructible and invincible sword of energy. There's no doubt in my mind that it is your positive energy that does this. And I don't think it's fake. No money in the world could buy me this, just like no money in the world can buy me the love of my wife, of whom I'm immensely proud. Enough of these strange emotional, spiritual ramblings of an otherwise rational attorney. But I hope that through my sharing these feelings with you, I am giving you reason for hope and optimism too. In fact, I'm sure I do, because I know who I'm talking to. Part two. Last week, I told you that the excellent German journalist Paul Schreier won a huge victory in court under the German version of the Freedom of Information Act. His court victory forced the German equivalent of the CDC to make secret documents available, which proved that the so-called pandemic was, in reality, a plandemic. In light of the fact that the same thing happened simultaneously all over the world, it is very likely it was a lockstep thing, that this victory will have massive implications and ramifications worldwide. What's even more important is this, however. This very, very important piece of news, this victory, did not get stuck in the alternative media alone. Rather, it was impossible for the mainstream media to ignore it, because now many people, many of them personally affected by the so-called measures, want to know the truth about corona. And there will be more that they want to know. And now there will be an official investigation here in Germany. Well, that is exactly what I did for 3 years. First with the Corona Committee and then with ICIC. Part 3. This development is especially helpful for my defense in this staged criminal proceeding against me. And that's because now, all of a sudden and out of the blue, a secret dossier written up by the German intelligence services, headed by the German version of the FBI, whose current leader, ironically, was trained by my father, landed in our laps. This dossier explains everything and shows that the criminal case against me is a staged construct. In fact, a very famous and, of course, highly esteemed German law professor, who for the time being wants to remain anonymous, looked at the facts of my case and the charges and provided us with a short legal analysis. He comes to the conclusion that it is, of course, no violation of a fiduciary duty if we took out the loans in order to temporarily protect part of that money from imminent attachment by the authorities. The very same authorities, by the way, who were responsible for the dossier. As long as we were both willing and capable of repaying the loan, no problem, he says. And all the textbooks and all the case books say the very same thing. As an aside, and I don't want to blow my own horn here, I might add that without my work, there probably would not have been any donations. An additional, very crucial piece of information, I think I gave it to you before, makes the whole dossier and everyone involved in its execution look even more like a criminal conspiracy. Indeed, it makes the whole thing look like food for a RICO case, the famous Racketeer-Influenced Corrupt Organizations Act designed to go after mafia crimes. And here's the thing. Less than 2 years ago, all the facts that are now relevant, including the loans, were brought to the attention of a senior DA, an experienced senior DA, district attorney in Göttingen. She looked at the evidence and decided that there's no basis for a criminal investigation, let alone for an indictment, and ordered the non-case to be closed. So how can it be that less than 2 years later, based on a criminal complaint which real lawyers regard as obviously querulous and preposterous, another prosecutor, this time a very young, inexperienced assistant DA, had me kidnapped in Mexico so that I could be arrested at the Frankfurt airport. How can it be that this assistant DA never even tried to check the obviously insane charges in that criminal complaint? For example, that I threatened the authors of the complaint with a Winchester rifle. How can it be that that assistant DA refused to hear my side of the story while constantly communicating with my accusers? And why did he keep these many conversations with my accusers secret? A grave violation of his prosecutorial duty to include all the evidence, including such phone conversations, in the files, and make all of this available to the defense. Does this man have any idea that what a fair trial means? Well, the dossier gives us all the answers. It starts explaining about, actually in a very positive way, it starts explaining about how I had made a name for myself as an international attorney who fought both in court, through public interviews and speeches, and through many publications for democracy, the rule of law and free speech, and the protection of these values against attacks or overreach by private corporations and organizations. And it emphasizes that my international connections and friends made it possible for me to connect with an international community. Despite of all this, they conclude that I present a danger to democracy because some people didn't like what I was doing. There's no explanation as to who these some people are and on what basis they think that I present a danger for democracy. So in order to stop me and in particular to make it impossible for me to run for public office, the dossier advises that my immediate circle of people, those who I work with, should be infiltrated by an informant. We know that this is a former politician who befriended the 3 Berlin attorneys, 2 of whom I had made the mistake of allowing them to work with us in the Corona Committee. The idea behind this infiltration was to collect as much info about me as possible and to then hire another agent, a prosecutor, to start a criminal proceeding against me. The undercover informer who befriended the 3 attorneys manipulated them with false information about me into writing the above-mentioned obviously idiotic and, as we know now, totally false complaint. But the fact that the legal quality of the complaint was beyond the pale didn't matter, as according to the dossier, another undercover agent, this time the assistant DA, would spring into action and make sure that none of the real experienced DAs in Göttingen would once again quash the case like the experienced senior DA had done based on the very same facts less than 2 years ago. For this purpose, he was transferred from Hanover to Göttingen, intercepted the idiotic criminal complaint, and took charge of the matter. He proceeded with an illegal and unconstitutional secret investigation, which was actually limited to taking everything in the complaint as factually true without even trying to check either the allegations or the credibility of the 3 attorneys who filed it. After more than a year of this so-called investigation, he made sure that none of his continuous telephone conversations with my accusers would show up in the file and had me kidnapped in Mexico. He then proceeded to write an indictment that matches the ineptitude of the 3 Berlin buffoons. Had he conducted an actual investigation, informed me about the charges, and giving me an opportunity to respond, his case would have collapsed then and there like a house of cards. Even if he had at least questioned the now totally destroyed credibility of my accusers, he would have immediately known that there was no case, only false accusations. Why do I say this? Because on April 2nd and 3rd, when the court, my attorneys, and I did what the assistant DA, who, by the way, never asked a single question, had failed to do, that is, when we interrogated one of the 3 attorneys who filed the complaint, she admitted that the 2 central pillars of this totally false indictment on which it rests do not exist. The first pillar is, in contrast to the indictment's false central assumption, I, as a director of the corporation that ran the Corona Committee, had the power to act completely independent of the others and did not need their approval for anything. This is, of course, of special importance in cases of emergency situations, which we were facing back then. And it is especially important when 2 of the 4 directors do not participate in anything, and as the files show now, and my former co-host has actually confirmed, do not respond to anything. Asked why they had falsely informed the assistant DA, the witness shrugged and said, "Oh well, looks like we made a mistake." The second pillar on which the indictment rests was its false assumption that I never intended to repay the loan, even though it was transparently listed in the corporation's books, and even though I had been the international face of the Corona Committee and relied on the Corona Committee's financial security to continue with its work, and then use the evidence it produced in international legal proceedings. Even the court now admits that this is not the case. That means that I was both willing and able to repay the loan. Asked if the accusers had any evidence for this false allegation, she admitted that she had none except for my former co-host's equally false assumptions that were based on nothing but thin air. In light of the dossier, we now believe she too was just another one of the dossier's puppets. Now that the two cornerstones of the indictment have come crashing down, it's clear that the famous law professor's legal analysis is correct, of course. Under the circumstances, the loan was not a violation of a fiduciary duty to protect the donations. Au contraire, as my French friends would say, on the contrary. Through this dossier, it has also become clear why the assistant DA acted so utterly incompetent and brazenly illegal, and why, despite the fact that there's clear and convincing evidence that the three buffoons stole my money, my client's money, he did nothing, didn't even attach the bank account where the money is in order to secure whatever is left of it, if there is anything left. The female attorney whom we interrogated over the last couple of days literally admitted that the three attorneys had threatened the buyer of my house and forced him to divert much more than 1 million euros of my purchase price into their account. After all this, it is next to impossible to escape the conclusion that the deal between the three buffoons and the assistant DA is that they helped him kidnap me and put me behind bars, and in return, he would allow them to keep the stolen money and help them get all the other assets of the Corona committee, namely the gold. And it is equally hard to escape the conclusion that the assistant DA, whose ineptitude would have kept him from having a real career in real life, was promised exactly that, a real career based on the heroic ingenuity that led to my incarceration. There are many more instances of outright displays of insanity by the actors in this evolving crime and spy show, but I'll save this for another day. One thing is certain, though, the evil side, that is the not so very intelligent intelligence services that set me up with the help of their undercover buffoons, never expected that my work in the Corona Committee and then in ICIC would be vindicated by the above-mentioned recent developments. There will be an official investigation of the pandemic. I'll close by hearkening back to the Winchester allegations. Some of you may remember the TV show The Rifleman with Chuck Connors. Well, when I was a child and my father showed me the police academy's rifle range, this was my favorite show. Watch the opening credits on YouTube and you'll see Chuck Connors fire his rifle to bring justice. Well, that's how I saw my father as a little boy. Now, of course, I'm a grown man and I'm an attorney, and that's how I'll make sure that justice will be done as an attorney. But I still love that show, and my father, of course. See you later.